So I suppose the obvious question is, am I for real this evening? The ultimate truth. And the answer is, yeah, in one way, yeah, absolutely. This is part 2 of the emptiness of emptiness. The emptiness of emptiness, the two truths, conventional, relative truth, absolute, ultimate truth. And started last time with really the dangers of our responses to the idea of emptiness. The traditional image of the Dharma as poisonous, the dangers of picking up a snake by the wrong end. And if we think that emptiness is something to do with non-existence, and we conclude from that that I don't exist, or that there is really only mind or consciousness, or that the world is my creation, or that there is now no meaning in the world and no possibility of meaning because all is empty, all is illusion. We get round to thoughts like, I am God, God is dead. And in the sharing afterwards, we had some serious questions. Okay, so where does that leave suffering? Good question, seeing as that's basically our business. This is the suffering business. And okay, if the question of emptiness is so dangerous, so hard, then perhaps our practice is really just about the pragmatic, just approaching everyday experience, and we'll leave that stuff. No worries. So this evening, I wanted to really disagree with everything I said last week. And I want to take as my text this book by Nagarjuna, the Mulya Madhyamaka Karika, the fundamental wisdom of the middle way. Because Nagarjuna really sorts a lot of this out for us. And he was writing in maybe 200 Common Era, so that's about 1800 years ago. Nobody knows very much about him. That's not really significant because this is a book of philosophy, of logic. And Nagarjuna is often referred to as the second Buddha, certainly regarded as the most important Buddhist philosophy. Founder of the Madhyamaka tradition, which comes through His Holiness the Dalai Lama, absolutely serious Madhyamika, follower of Nagarjuna's philosophy in that sense. And although 1800 years later we're still asking questions about what did Nagarjuna really mean, and obviously that is open to interpretation, understanding, misunderstanding, revision, argument, which is all to the good. I think in some ways the basic point is quite clear. And I want to follow Nagarjuna's argument, but I won't follow it in quite the way that he does. And we'll read a few selected verses from the fundamental wisdom of the middle way, probably just at the end. So it's basically Nagarjuna's argument, but not as he presents it. It's, in this edition, 75 pages of wonderfully atmospheric, suggestive and seemingly contradictory poetry. which needs sorting out and resolving. Okay, so I'll start in a direction which I normally hate, which is to say, oh, let's take an image from physics, because there's a thing that for some reason Buddhists and Zenists seem to love, the idea of physics as providing us with some guiding principles. Oh, look, Buddhism is like physics. And the reason that I'm taking this model is the fact that the image, the metaphor, breaks down very quickly. And this is the interesting bit, is why it doesn't work. I shall explain. We know there are particles, there are fundamental particles. There is a wonderfully complex universe out there. And over recent decades, we've had a lot of talk about dark matter. Matter, stuff, out there, which we cannot see, which seems to emit very little or no radiation, and which we have to infer its presence. And in fact, there are now, again, serious discussions about whether dark matter actually exists or whether we just got the sums wrong, basically, and it appeared as an illusion. But we'll say, okay, this stuff which is barely detectable, it has effects, but not directly, and you can't measure those. You can only measure the effects several stages on, and because of those results, you infer that this stuff must exist. So far, so good. Similarly, at the other end of the scale, fundamental particles, or nearly fundamental particles. When I was interested in atomic physics, one of the big deals was neutrinos. Tiny little particles. No charge. Virtually no matter. Virtually undetectable. So this is the point at which they were building vast tanks in caves underground to try and catch the odd neutrino. Why is this? Well, because having no charge and virtually no mass, they really don't interact with anything very much. So you're very lucky if you can get the odd one which, through to the particular circumstances, reacts in a certain way, and you get a little trail and you can follow that up. And again, very complicated maths, very clever stuff. You can infer the existence of that neutrino. Things have moved on since then, but it's just the principle that I'm interested in. Okay, so if we're saying, and this is the fundamental Buddhist assumption about the unreality of the self and the emptiness of all things, to fully exist, to have substance, to have an essence, a thing has to be itself and only itself, and it can't interact with anything else because otherwise that would compromise its separateness and its selfness. So you can see that in this sense, dark matter and neutrinos are almost real because they have so little interaction. They're just there, or maybe they aren't there, but we barely know about it. So imagine now a kind of super dark matter or a super neutrino, which leaves absolutely no trace. It has no discernible effect, no interaction with anything else in the universe. Well, in our terms, that's sounding like it's almost really real because it's itself. It's only itself. It's not influenced by anything. It's having no influence on anything else. Let's go crazy. Maybe there's a whole other dimension like that. Wow, fantastic. And it's there and it's really real. But then we come up with the really clever stuff like ideas about time travel or something. Maybe we could communicate with that dimension or that super dark matter. Maybe we could get to the really real. Except, imagine we now find an unbelievably clever way of doing that. We've touched the really real. We've interacted with it. It wasn't real after all because we've interacted with it. Because... And that seems like a really weird way of defining what the really real is. Something which is itself and always itself and only itself. And this is basically Nagarjuna's starting point, saying, well, how would the universe have to be for anything, for even one thing to be really real in this sense? And how is the universe if it's not? So rather than starting with Buddhist theory and saying, oh no, things are empty, oh dear, that's a real problem, he starts from simple logic. Okay, let's imagine something was really real. Very quickly, goes through again and again and again, takes every possible way of thinking about this and shows that a thing which is really real in this sense is contradictory, self-contradictory. Nothing can be, once you get down into the logic of it, permanent, separate, or self-identical. This means that the lack of a self, what we're calling emptiness, is not some accidental property of the world. It's the condition for the world actually to exist, for the universe to exist, for you and me to exist. We have to be empty in this sense. Otherwise, nothing works, nothing is possible. Which is kind of interesting, because now suddenly, instead of being this strange crossing weight of what, suddenly we can see there's no problem with emptiness. It's merely the condition of existence. The problem was not with reality. Very Buddhist conclusion. It was our idea of reality. It's our ideal of what something that was real would have to be. And that certainly is interesting. And actually, it gets much worse in one sense, because things, and you and I think of a thing, and we think of a thing, a cup, a book, a person. But actually, emptiness, the non-substantiality, applies to absolutely everything. Dharma means thing, but thing in the widest possible sense. So, time and space are empty. And if there's no substance to time, then we can't talk about an absolute sense of continuation or even presence or simultaneity. Buddhas, obviously, are empty, insubstantial in this sense. What? But surely that's where we're going. That's what we're trying. Nirvana, definitionally empty, just the same. Consciousness. Oh, but surely there's the great transcendent world. No, empty, just another thing. Emptiness is not unreality. Here we are again, really important point. We want to think, we always want to think, it stands to reason. It's absolutely logical. Either something exists or it doesn't. Either it's existent or it's non-existent. And basically, Nagarjuna's whole point is, not so fast, it's not that simple. There is nothing that in an absolute sense you can say either exists or doesn't exist. Or to go with the tetralemma, both exists and does not exist, or neither exists nor not exists. Everything is both, well, and again, we have to say it, don't we? Because we're trying to use words. Everything exists and doesn't exist, sort of exists, somewhat exists. We're driven to use these words, which are, and this is Nagarjuna's whole point, at the end of the day, completely inadequate. I haven't got the verses aligned with the talk exactly, but okay, so this is just from the examination of conditions. If things did not exist without essence, the phrase, when this exists, so this will be. It's absolutely basic. This is, so that is. Absolutely basic Buddhism. The phrase, when this exists, so this will be, would not be acceptable. So basically, if things aren't empty, if things have essences, there's no point at which causality can operate. There's no causes and conditions because things can't affect one another. Stands to reason. If we think about things as absolutely separate, then we get into this problem. So we have this situation where what can we say about the existence and non-existence of objects, including time and space, mind, consciousness, everything else. Examination of elements. Fools and reificationists who perceive the existence or the non-existence of objects do not see the pacification of objectification. What's that mean? Well, pacification is taking away the problem, ending suffering in that sense, quieting, whatever image, whatever metaphor we want to use, calming, cooling. Fools and those who insist on seeing things as absolutely real. Fools and reificationists who perceive the existence and non-existence of objects. So you literally see this as, well, it's there, yes, but it's not there. Of objects do not see the pacification of objectification. If you're going to stick to the idea of it's all an illusion or it's all perfectly real in an absolute sense, then there's no chance of addressing suffering. There's no chance of ending suffering. And that is our business. That is the whole business of practice. Saving all beings, freeing all beings, as the Four Great Vows say. Let's think of a couple of examples, maybe. So-so, they're quite good, but problematic too. Let's think of the example of colour. Let's think of the colour yellow. It's a nice colour, a warm, friendly, welcoming colour. Is yellow real or is yellow unreal? Well, we know, it's basic physics that colour has no real existence in the world. Colour is a perception. Yes, but we really perceive it. So to the extent that it's an illusion, it's a real illusion. It's really there, but it's not in the thing. It's in the relationship. It's in the relationship between me as perceiving and the thing as being a thing of which I can say truthfully, it's yellow, without the yellow really existing as a thing within the thing. Or we'll take another example. Money. Money isn't real. Or it is real. What? Money has no real existence outside our mutual agreement that we're going to run the world that way. That this piece of paper is worth £10 and that there is a thing called a pound for it to be worth, or $1 or whatever. Or that these numbers, in the context of this set of numbers, which we're calling a bank account, actually means this, or that this number will be a percentage rate of interest on this amount of money, or that I require that set of numbers. But it is real to the extent that because we act as if it were real, because we believe in the money, it works. Obviously, the counterexample to that is when you get a run on the banks or something and people stop believing in money, that these numbers are actually worth anything, and they'll want something real to hold on to, and the whole system collapses temporarily, and then it has to be sorted out. And of course, but you can say, well, no, originally money was all about gold, wasn't it? Because gold is really valuable. Well, no, there is no value, no real value in the gold. we attribute we attribute value to it because it's quite rare. Other places, well, you've used all kinds of things as money, cowrie shells, whatever. They have value because we attribute value to them, because we have a relationship between us based on this attributed value. The effects are absolutely real. People can starve to death, do starve to death, because there is no money there. Very real effects. But the money itself isn't really real. It has conventional value. And all the time we're talking about conventional value or relative value. And sometimes it's more useful to think in terms of relative value, relational. And sometimes it's quite useful to think in terms of conventional value. Yes, we've agreed that this be so in some way. And Nagarjuna's point is that the only kind of value we can ever actually find, and I'm not just talking about money here, the only kind of value we can ever find is conventional value. The only kind of truth we can ever find is this relative conventional truth. And that conventional truth is truth. Most of the time it works. Gravity. Well, that's an idea, but it works. Electric light is an idea, a set of physics equations, technology, properties of metal, all the stuff. It's not made up. It works, but it still relies on those what are ultimately conventional ideas, conventional truths about the world. So basically, we can never get beyond that. Just because things are empty doesn't mean they're devoid of reality. What actually makes the difference at the end of the day? Well, actually coherence, consistency, reliability, predictability, all the kinds of things which science, philosophy, human relationships, psychology talk about. This is what we actually have. This is what we actually have to work with. So emptiness, well, you see the problem. Last time I was talking about the difference between thinking of emptiness with a capital E as a big noun that was a thing, a proper property that was universal and always and absolute. If we do that, we're lost. We're just, in Nagarjuna's terms, reifying. We're pretending that a relative, relational, conventional thing is an absolute. And it's very logical in then to realise, well, emptiness isn't the one true thing in a world of conventional reality. Emptiness is empty. It's just another idea. It's just another way of thinking, another way of relating to the world. So that's quite difficult. Let's see, maybe we can find a nice verse relevant for that. Are we there yet? Yeah, so how should we think of things when they're not real, not unreal? It's a very famous verse, rather beautiful. Like a dream, like an illusion, like a city of Gandharvas, so have arising, abiding and ceasing been explained. Illusions, but illusions are always real. A while ago I was talking about the movie Lawrence of Arabia and these fantastic panoramas of the desert. Deserts that look like oceans. The heat haze reflecting the sky. Blue, rippling blue like waves moving across the surface of the water. You look out over the desert and all you see is sea. But that perception is absolutely real. problem is that we misinterpret it. Our problem is that we see it as, and go, I know what that is. I will bring the concept C to this. And then we're lost. It's actually, I'm seeing sand under a particular set of atmospheric conditions. It's about relationship. It's about the relationship of the sky and the sand and my perceptual organs. Always comes back to convention, always comes back to relationship in that sense. Take something really obvious like a table. Again, we can play with the whole kind of conventional idea here. A table. I go, I look at this table and I see it as merely an illusion. Well, no, it's a table. The table's really there. It's just, it's not simply a table. Well, it is and it isn't a table, isn't it? Let's think about this. It's a collection of pieces of wood which were bits of tree, will end up as sawdust or being eaten or, whatever, rotting in the ground or being burnt, whatever, it doesn't matter. At the moment, these are in a particular configuration. And because I see it as a table, I say it's a table. And most importantly of all, I use it as a table. I put things on it. What is a table? Well, a table is something you can put things on, whether you're eating at it or writing or whatever. It is a table. Its conventional relative truth is as a table. But there's no real table thing there. It's a set of relationships. It's true, but it's true as relationship. It's true relatively so. So from our side, as the Tibetans say, it is a table. So what can we say about the ultimate truth then? Well, as Nagarjuna says, there's really nothing we can say about it. And again, this is the kind of slippery little hole through which you can go anywhere, basically. You can say, yes, but really, meditation will let us access this absolute truth. Well, no, because it's not an elsewhere, and it's not an else when, and it's not a different way of perceiving the world. Kind of is, kind of isn't. It's not a state of consciousness or anything. The absolute truth is, the ultimate truth is, there is no ultimate truth. Or the ultimate truth is just this, as we would say in Zen. But again, what am I actually pointing to? Hard. What Nagarjuna points to as the thing we can say is the difference between being in samsara, the world of cyclic existence, the world of suffering, and being in Nirvana, the world of peace, pacification, to use Nagarjuna's phrase, is simply to see the conditioned, the conventional, the relative as conditioned, conventional, and relative. And one way we approach that is through study, is through understanding the emptiness of emptiness. And that's one way in which we can actually approach that. This begins to connect up with what Joko Beck was talking about as the fundamental of our practice, which is meeting the ultimate, meeting the abstract, not as something else, not as somewhere else, but simply in the resistance of being this, of the world not conforming to my conventional expectations, my conventional demands, my fears, wishes, aspirations. And in that tension, and in that pain, and in that suffering, having an opportunity to sense this conventionality of the world, if we're prepared to stay with the actual experiencing of it, rather than immediately rushing off, labelling it, sending it round and round in a spiral. You know the deal, all the self stuff. So it turns out that emptiness just isn't a problem because, like everything else, it's empty. But that, the emptiness of emptiness, and if we wanted to, the emptiness of emptiness, because there's no final, final really real there. It's all just this conventional. This is the condition of possibility of life. It's the condition of the possibility of practice. It's the condition of the possibility of the end of suffering. It's the condition of possibility itself, of a world that is active and open. The wondrous, terrifying world of not knowing. And sometimes what's required of us is an action. And sometimes it's a word. And sometimes, like Vimalakirti, it's silence. Before this, nothing that can be saidness. So the ultimate truth is not elsewhere. It isn't elsewhen. As Nagarjuna says, not an atom of difference between samsara and nirvana. This is what we are. This is what we live. Yeah. Why we need to understand that emptiness is empty. The victorious ones have said that emptiness is the relinquishing of all views. For whomever emptiness is a view, for whoever believes in emptiness, capital E, that one will accomplish nothing. Yeah, and again, on existence and non-existence. To say it is to grasp for permanence. To say it is not is to adopt the view of nihilism. And that's too often what we think of as emptiness. Therefore, a wise person does not say exists or does not exist. Yeah, well, for him to whom emptiness is clear, everything becomes clear. For him to whom emptiness is not clear, nothing becomes clear. When you foist on us all of your errors, you are like a man who has mounted his horse and has forgotten that very horse. If you perceive the existence of all things in terms of their essence, then the perception of all things will be without the perception of causes and conditions. No causality. Effects and causes and agent and action and conditions and arising and ceasing and effects will be rendered impossible. World of essences, nothing. Whatever is dependently co-arisen, that is explained to be emptiness. Causality isn't contradicted by emptiness. Emptiness is the precondition of causality, arising, ceasing, dependently co-arising. Whatever is dependently co-arisen, that is explained to be emptiness. That, being a dependent designation, is itself the middle way. And of course, if this is all middle way Buddhism, this is making that appeal right back to the Buddha talking about the middle way. What else have we got? Yeah, okay. These are the killer verses on Nirvana. There is not the slightest difference between cyclic existence, samsara, and nirvana. There is not the slightest difference between nirvana and cyclic existence. Whatever is the limit of nirvana, that is the limit of cyclic existence. There is not even the slightest difference between them, or even the subtlest thing. And that is one to chew on, given that we are so determined that samsara is a problem and that nirvana is where we would like to be. Because this is a taking away, because of this is a negation, a cancelling out of this kind of naive idea of reality which we want to exist. Ultimately, what can we say about the ultimate? This is the sense in which we have to understand the famous idea of the Buddha not teaching. The pacification of all objectification. That's what we're talking about. And the pacification of illusion. No dharma was taught by the Buddha at any time, in any place, to any person. And of course he used a lot of words to do this, but to try and clear away illusion. We don't assert, we stop. We try and stop this process of ascribing real reality to things. And what are we left with? Conventional truth, relative truth, and relationship and non-separation, not separate. With the cessation of ignorance, action will not arise. The cessation of ignorance occurs through meditation and wisdom. That's why we practice. That's what our practice is ultimately about, in that sense. The cessation of ignorance, the cessation of imagining that there's a really real separate from this. This is what we live. This is who we are, not separate.